I'm Sue Larkey. I am a passionate teacher who calls herself a pracademic, which is a practical academic. I have done so much study and research and read every book I think on autism spectrum disorder, neurodiversity, constantly learning. I share with you the practical tips and strategies that I wished I'd known when I was in the classroom 35 years ago. I've spent the last 35 years trying to work out the best tips and strategies to help children who learn and engage differently, our neurodiverse children. Each week in this podcast are to give you step-by-step insights and understanding and strategies and bring on the world experts in whatever area that I'm learning about. My aim is to save you time and stress by giving you practical tips and strategies, but more importantly, to not feel so alone. I know what it's like as a classroom teacher in that room, often feeling like, what am I doing here? I remember the feeling of going from feeling like I was just babysitting children to actually thriving in the classroom. And that is my aim for you. I want you to have all the strategies that are going to make the world of difference to you and the children you know. Welcome, everybody. This podcast is to accompany the ebook that many of you would have got with your emails this week, which is Setting Up Your Classroom for Success. The book or the ebook is free and it's full of lots of top tips. And this is like a mini training to go with the ebook. So you're welcome to stop now, go and download the ebook. Now, personally, I like to have it on my phone or my iPad, so I've got it to refer back to. And if you want some more tips and strategies, if you don't get my emails, please check your spam. But also, if you aren't a subscriber, you can just go to where this podcast episode is on my website and you can download the ebook. Today, I really want to go through the ebook with things like quick tips for secondary, tips for using timers, how and why to use visuals, setting up your individual education plans, 9 tips for homework, because this stuff needs to be set up now. This is the key stuff. When people say to me, I'm getting a class, Sue, with a neurodiverse child, or I had an email last week, like it's my first class that I've had in special education, what do I need in place? This is the stuff you need in place. You know, homework could be everything from a child taking home a reader to a secondary school doing more complex homework, but you still need to set that up front. You need to still make the rules and routines clear from the beginning. And many of you would have listened to my podcast last year on the power of repetition. But that repetition starts from day one. You're going to set that up now. And if you haven't set it up now, you know, these first few weeks is the time to set up those routines, repetition, because guess what? The more repetition and routines, the less you have to talk and direct, which means the less auditory processing. And if you have an oppositional child, they don't want you constantly telling them what to do. But if they know the routine, then you don't have to get involved. In fact, routines makes us less stressed. So some of you might remember in that routine and repetition, I think I said, go into your kitchen now and move your cutlery to the bottom drawer or move your tea towel somewhere else. See how long it takes you to remember where the new things are. Or I don't know about you, but when I'm in Airbnbs or if we go away on holidays, it takes me a while to remember where things are in the kitchen. And then by the time sort of day 3 in, I'm knowing, the cling wrap's over there or the tea towels are there or this person keeps their dishwashing pallets there. So I would love you to move something and see how long it takes for you to adjust to that new routine. The reason I'm saying that is so often people don't give my kids at the start of the year that take-up time. They forget that children on the spectrum take longer to establish those new routines. There is so much more they need to take in. It's social, sensory, which the rest of us take in quickly and adapt. In fact, one of my students many years ago, one of the things I let him do is just sit at the back of the room for a day and just absorb all the sensory, get to know his new teacher's voice and sound, to observe the students, to get used to watching everybody, because he was a visual learner. And he learnt best by watching and observing the social, not being part of it. So many of us want to be part of everything and we want the child to be full on into everything, but that can be exhausting. And for example, for girls who mask, this is where they will be masking, and often then we'll get the shutdown or meltdowns, the veneer of coping when they get home. So this is why this ebook about setting up your classroom, no matter what age or stage, if you're in the early years right through to secondary, it's about setting it up front. It's about thinking about these things and thinking, okay, is this child or student the sort of child that I need to have more routines? Do I need to create more repetition? Because over the years, what I found, if the first step's the same, then I can change what we're doing. So, for example, when I went to school, you'd write the date and rule up your page. Some students need a prompt to get started. Now, if one day it's write from the board and one day it's work in a group, sometimes that's all just too much. Maybe just get them to write the date, because to write the date, you have to have your pen, your book ready. So many things have to be ready. So think about, say, going to line up. Are they better off having a set spot in the line because they get anxious and they get stressed or they want to be first? One of my favorite sayings is, it's easier to change the structure than change the child. So a structural change would be writing the date. That's a change of structure, isn't it? That instead of having to think what I did on the weekend to start or what the first activity I need to do, writing the date. A structural change might be having a set number in the line. A structural change might be the child having a set spot on the mat. A structural change might be their homework goes in the tub, their reader goes in the tub. In secondary, can I just warn you, if you've got students transitioning to secondary, that's one of the challenges. In primary, often teachers mark off getting their work, and in secondary, not all teachers do that. And some of my students are waiting to be asked for their homework. So maybe you need to make sure they know what the routine is. Do they email it in? What is the change? So I always think it's really helpful to just stand back and really have a think, what are the key things I need in place? Now, you could spend hours doing that, or you can download the ebook and have a look what I think the 18 key things are. And I've actually got 18 ways to set up your classroom. And I've got like a checklist there with coloured dots that you can tick off what to do. That will check that you've got those key things in place. And that includes everything from thinking about who they're working with in partners to thinking about what happens when they change environments, when they go to the library, or if you're going to be sick. See, some of my kids are already worried about that. What if you're going to be away? Or if, you've got meetings to start the year, some schools do that, then they need to know that. You might need a social script around that. And I like to have a what to do if my teacher's away. And those of you who have attended my workshops, I now send out a lovely social script to go with that, like a PDF that you can edit that talks through what to do if my teacher's away, because students need to know that. And that's the sort of thing that could be worrying your students already. Now, I just want to warn you, some of my students have a honeymoon. You might be listening to this going, oh, Sue, everything's going so well. Everything's wonderful. Parents, you might be feeling the same way. Teacher assistants, though, who might have known this student before, or my angels as I call you, you might know this student and know they are sort of got their amygdala very high, their eyes very wide, and they're just watching. They actually are in what I call the honeymoon period. They're just sort of sitting back and watching, and actually, I hate to say it, you might be seeing some behaviour coming soon. Once everyone's settled in, or the whole class starts to get noisier because the whole class is checking you out. It really depends on the class, but I have seen this where people go, oh, such a smooth start. And then week 2, it all unravels. So you might need to come back to my checklist and check what's happening. Or you might need my favourite book. And parents, I'm hoping you already own this to hand over to your teachers, Behaviour Solutions for Inclusive Classrooms, or I call it See a Behaviour, look it up. And I'll make sure I do refer to the podcast on routines and repetition and behavior solutions in the podcast notes. But what I love about this is you might have a student who is having problems at lunchtime, and you can literally, I'm just turning to the pages, look at some solutions in there. You might have a child who's losing materials and missing things. Now, first week, you mightn't have seen that, but week 2, you might. And then this has about 10 solutions. Now, what I love about the 10 solutions, I can go, done it. Oh, hang on. I actually haven't asked them that one. Like this one, make it a point at the beginning of a day to nonchalantly pull the student aside and ask them to open their backpack and give you the homework assignment. This is considered prompting the student. Sorry, that must be one for losing things or not handing in things. So I have had that happen where the student actually does have things but haven't bought them, particularly in secondary where they might have a locker and they just don't go to their locker to get their pens and pencils, and they haven't lost the equipment. They just haven't got that routine of going to the locker and getting something out of there. Or, they're not aware where things are. And with homework, some of my students, you didn't ask for it. So anyway, I love that book, Behaviour Solutions. It has everything from difficulty at carpet time, covering ears, taking off shoes, fidgeting, chewing on their shirt. I think every age, whether you're early years right through to secondary, that's a must-have book. And I think it's about $30, and it's just a look it up book. And parents, often I recommend you take it to your IEP meetings that I'm going to talk about in a minute, because often in an IEP, we're asked to come up with some strategies or solutions. And I find that book ideal to look in, and we can agree, here's some things. Because parents, I'm sure you're like me, that often you walk away and you go, oh, I forgot to tell them I do this. I forgot to tell them I do that. Because when you've known a child for so long, you do it innately. So I think that's really important to remember, that having something like that on hand, or I would recommend my Ultimate Guide to School and Home. I have so many parents and professionals tell me that is their absolute favourite books. I recommend the Ultimate Guide to School and Home for all ages. And if you have a secondary school student, the Essential Guide to Secondary, because both of those books are based on hundreds of questions that both myself and Anna Tullemans have had. We compiled them into a book. They're all the questions we get asked all the time in there. So why reinvent the wheel? Get those books. You can refer back to them all the time. I've had people call them things like a Bible, which is a bit extreme, but, I had a grandparent who had taken over being the primary carer for her 3 grandchildren on the spectrum. She literally bought the book to a workshop and wanted me to sign it. She said, Sue, we had a birthday party on the weekend. I was overwhelmed. I wanted to say no, we weren't going to go. Looked in your book and boom, there were a whole lot of strategies. I've had from teachers who are, I'm just trying to think, who want to know something like, we're going on camp. What should we do? And so I've got a pro forma for camp or excursions. Oh, make sure, by the way, if you have camps or excursions coming up, there is a great podcast and checklist on that. If you don't have the book, make sure you have a listen to the podcast and have a look at the cheat sheet, because I have had so much success with that podcast cheat sheet and the information in my books, where kids who weren't going to, or students who weren't going to attend camp, ended up going because of all the preparation and tips we had in there, both for the family, the student, and yourselves as educators. And often teacher assistants, that's a good book for you to go to too. Okay, so I am already quite a long way into this podcast, but do not worry. Most of the things in this podcast are already written down in the ebook. I'm just going to add to why this is important and what else you need to do. So the number one thing, no matter what age, I need you to assess this student's motor skills. Motor skills are a massive barrier to getting work done. If a student has dysgraphia, which is the ability to speak but not being able to write things down, you're going to get a lot of frustration. You're going to get a student who doesn't want to do a lot of writing activities. They're going to tire really quickly. But if they have ADHD and dysgraphia, they're going to lose their thoughts. So they're going to get frustrated. So you're going to have to think, do we need something else? Can we do voice to text? What else can we do for that student? If you've never heard of dysgraphia, this student often can you can ask them, what are you going to write about now? Blah, 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 blah. And then they can't keep up with that writing. The other thing for many of my children who are perfectionists, they may want their work to look so neat. They want every letter perfect. They want it written perfectly. Now, this is why some students might write in capitals. This is why some students prefer typing, because in typing and using their computer, they can delete things and people never know they made the mistake. Why they write in capitals is it's much easier to do little straight lines to keep it neat than doing those curves. That's much harder. But so much of this comes back to fine and gross motor challenges. Many neurodiverse students have fine and gross motor challenges. Now, what Sally McNamara taught me is about how fine and gross motor are very related. But think of a baby. A baby learns to roll over first before they learn to pick up a spoon. Some of your students have very poor core, which means we're asking them to pick up a pen and write, but they haven't got the core skills. So Sally has a book, the Fine Motor Flip book, which I love. If you're in primary, I recommend particularly in the from 5 to 8 year olds, but early childhood, this book's great for you. You can set up stations with Sally's activities. It's a flip book. It's like having an OT in your early childhood setting. For those of you who can't get access to an OT to come to your early childhood setting, I highly recommend you get this flip book and set it up as like an OT program for your students. Many of my students start school now with terrible handwriting. And once children learn all these things, prerequisite for school, not just neurodiverse children struggle, a lot of children struggle. So what I would recommend is you have a look in Sally's book. But here are some things you need to think about. So if the child has poor posture, it's highly likely the handwriting's going to be messy, isn't it? But one of the things Sally recommended on the podcast she came on, when you do your reading, get them to lie on their stomach and put their book in front of them and push their body up to read. Or you can even put a cushion under there. So they're building that strength in their trunk, yes? Because that's all part of actually their fine motor, having that strength to sit up on their table. I really challenge you to go back and have a look. Is this child actually leaning on their desk? When you're sitting on their mat, do they have to hold their hand up? Do they not have the skill to put one hand in the air? In fact, try that as a brain break tomorrow, where they put one hand up, the other hand up. See if they can do that classic, put their hand up, put their knee up. Have a look at their coordination, because those big gross motor coordination also impacts on the fine motor. Remember, a baby learns to roll and crawl before they learn to pick up a spoon. So have a think. We can't ask a child to pick up a pen who can't even really do a lot of that gross motor stuff. And we need to work on both, not just on the fine motor. Now, you might be going, oh, but Sue, they're in year 2. I know, they're still going to have to do this stuff, but you can make it fun, make it a body break. So that's where I love the Kids Guide to Being Awesome that's also written by an OT. You can do some of those activities in there, like throwing beanbags at a target. That's actually going to help their handwriting. Some of my students don't even have left and right hand preference, by the way. So again, you've just got this student. Go and check. Do they have a preference? Because if they haven't, this would be alerting you that to fine and gross motor challenges. Now, the thing Sally taught me that I love the most, and lots of you have heard me talk about this before, put a piece of paper under their arm, whether they're doing cutting or writing. Because when they put a piece of paper under their arm and they have to hold that piece of paper there, but you could just put a pen or something under their arm. When they have to hold that, what it is, it's actually activating their core. So when they're activating their core, their cutting and handwriting is going to be better anyway. So we might need to do that. Remember, it's going to be a routine. We have to reprogram their brain, because if they slump, boom, the piece of paper is going to fall, or the pen. If they wriggle a lot, it's going to fall. So, and that's the thing. A lot of my children wriggle, and that's why their handwriting gets messy. So have a look in the ebook at the great ideas, and you'll get to see the flip book in there and how it has different ideas and how you can use that as a whole class approach. Set up stations. If you've got a group of children who really are struggling with motor control, have a look at Sally's book. Now, the next thing is your IEPs. Parents, teacher assistants. Yes, teacher assistants. I want you involved in the IEPs. You often ask to implement without being involved. So teachers, how about we invite the angels to our meetings? Or if they can't come, how about we get some ideas from them and make sure they're involved? Because I often find it's my angels who have to follow through on these IEPs. So parents, I've got some quick tips there for you. And teachers, I recommend you grab these things too. Make sure you grab recent reports from specialists. Find out what's working at home. Is home using a reward system? Is the child getting to sleep? How do they wake up in the morning? All of these things impact on your classroom. What are their areas of strengths? I really like to start all my IEPs, 3 things that are going well. What were 3 positives over the holidays? What were 3 things that went well last year? Start with the positives. I hate the fact that so often programs and our IEPs are very negative, and they have to be because we're trying to fill a need and we have to justify it, but it doesn't mean we have to always focus on the negative. Children with neurodiversity have a lot of strengths, and I would love you to start with what is the student's strengths, because then you can use that to build. You might have a child with amazing writing skills. The last little section might be irrelevant to you, but have a think about that. And what are the successes at school in the past? What have they loved? And Dean Beadle makes an amazing point. Some of you who've done the teacher assistant part B with Dean Beadle, teacher assistants, please make sure you go and listen to those Dean Beadle podcasts and consider doing his course this year. I know we've had 1,000 people do the first teacher assistant part A. Part B would be awesome. If you're having a meeting for your professional learning this year, I would encourage you to do Dean Beadle's Part B, because Dean is an amazing advocate. His teacher assistant changed his life. But what Dean talks about, often in secondary, the students taken out for learning support during their best subjects. Let them be in their best subjects. This is their best time. This is their time to shine. Don't take students out of where they're good. Let them have that. Let them have a time where they actually get to shine. It's just so important. And I think so often, and I hadn't even thought of that till Dean told me that. And then I was like, wow. And this is why I love learning from a lived experience. And, I'm hoping why you love learning from me is a lived experience as a teacher of what the mistakes I've made and the things I've learned along the way. The other thing is acronyms. Parents, make sure I made a list of acronyms last year of all the ones that people use. I couldn't even fit them all on a page, but make sure teachers maybe download that, particularly if parents have a new diagnosis, print that out for them. Again, I will link to it in my podcast, but lots of you would have got that email last year with frequently used acronyms. That would be a great page to print out and put up in your staff room anyway, but I recommend putting it at the front of your IEP. Parents, if you need to, bring an advocate. I get really upset when I see parents or hear from parents that they leave every IEP in tears. It shouldn't be like that. It should be a collaboration and working together. I'm not saying that mightn't sometimes happen, but I think if that's why we should be sharing our successes, why you should be taking along books like Behaviour Solutions and Ultimate Guide, so you can share your successes and strategies, but collaborate. It should be a collaborative, okay? Make sure you actually set the few meetings up front for the year. A lot of my parents don't like to ask, so let's put those meetings in the diary. Now, just a little aside, if parents are separated, I have found Zoom still a very effective way to do IEPs, because often if there is tension between parents but both want to be in the room, saves me having 2 meetings. I have just find Zoom fantastic for families where they might be separated, or there might be a grandparent that's a primary carer and a parent. We can get together on Zoom and take a lot of the emotion out of it. So I would highly recommend keeping Zoom up for some of your meetings. If you find that, and some of my parents themselves don't like coming into schools, they have actual trauma from their own schooling experience. So if it's more comfortable for them to Zoom in from their office or home, let's consider that. Let's be flexible. What works for everybody? So then I've got 3 steps. Obviously, step 1 is to update. Step 2 is setting your goals. I'm a big fan of SMART goals. If you don't know what they are, make sure you have a look at page 10 of the ebook. Then I recommend you think about the resources and strategies you need. So often we say we're going to do so many things. I think we need to be realistic, and sometimes we need to prioritize. But the other thing I would say is it might be where you go, okay, we haven't got that behavior solutions book. We haven't got the ultimate guide. Let's get those books. Let's get that fine motor flip book. Teachers, don't make more work for yourselves. Don't say I'll get on Pinterest or I'll get on Instagram. You can spend hours looking on there. And can I say, books take 2 years to be written, printed, edited, and printed. People put stuff on Instagram in 1 minute. It often hasn't got the depth of consideration and editing of a book. So, for me, a book is a much better reference than going on Pinterest, Instagram, or Facebook. Even though I use those things, I still think my books are invaluable as something to keep referring back to. But that's just me. I'm trying to get better at reading for the last 2 years because so often I was reading stuff on Facebook that wasn't well written, whereas a novel can take 4 or 5 years for someone to write an amazing story. Better off reading that. That's better for my brain, but that's just me. Okay. Now, the next thing that I think every one of you need is a timer. And have a think what sort of timer. If it's going to be a time timer, a portable digital schedule, is it going to be a timer on your iPad, no matter what age? If you're in the preschool, I personally love the time timers I'm just trying to think of the name of them, the Time Timer Plus, because they are nice and durable. But then there is the large one for the whole class. There is the mod that can be for smaller groups or for individuals. And then there is the portable schedule. So on page 15, I've got all those in the ebook. Now, why are timers so important? You use time every day. Timers let children know how long. And for ADHD children, time is a weird concept. Time can be very slow for them. So if you say 5 minutes on the mat, they will feel like it's 10 years. But when they're working, they'll often procrastinate till you say 5 minutes to go, and you'll get their best work in the last 5 minutes. So I recommend that, particularly for ADHD children, you use timers. I also think timers are amazing for letting children know when an activity is going to end. Some of my students don't like finishing, so a time timer that is visual shows them when it's going to finish. Now, I've got a heap of tips in the ebook of how to use timers. But the big one I'd like you to think about is regulation for drink, toilet, and body breaks. The rest of the class might be able to sit for half an hour. This student might be 10 minutes work, get up and do a 5-minute break. Dean Beadle would say in secondary school, if teachers gave him a 5-minute break, they would get another half an hour of work from him. Now, I have seen this so often, but I am busy. I can't keep track of it all the time. So think about how you're going to schedule those breaks. And going back to what I said at the beginning, having routine and repetition. Now, some of you are like, Sue, my child doesn't like timers. It makes them stressed. Don't worry. I've got some strategies on page 14, but the number one is modeling what to do if the timer runs out and you haven't finished. So often we stress children, oh my goodness, hurry up, you need to finish, you've got 5 minutes. If you haven't finished, that's okay. We'll put it in our box to finish later. If you haven't finished, that's okay. You can ask if you need to do all the work. If you haven't finished, what is the strategy? See, that's problem solving, knowing what to do. And many children on the spectrum like to complete things, and when we tell them to hurry up, they hate the word hurry up. Those of you who've done the Tony Atwood course would know that there are a few words that upset children on the spectrum, and one of them is hurry up. So maybe we need to put the timer on for the next 5 minutes. But the big one is making sure they can complete the task in the time frame. Don't ask them to do a page of work if you know that could take them an hour. Don't ask them to do something that's not possible. Parents, if the child sleeps in and gets up late, you can't expect them to be ready for school in 15 minutes. You need to be realistic, but model using time. I can't explain how important that is. Anyway, I am such a fan of time timers. All of you that use know how important they are, so I won't waffle on. But the main reason time timers are important is because they are visual. And if you look on page 16 and 17, I talk about why we use visuals. Visuals you can refer back to. Yay, the time timer you can refer back to. It's constant after the words are said. Yes, if you say 10 minutes to go, they can keep checking how long to go. Time visuals allow for slow processing. If something's written down or a visual routine, they don't have to rely on you to constantly remind them. Visuals help children refer for transition. That's what the time timer does. It lets them know how long. That's what the schedule does. It lets them know what's next, what's happening when. It is such an important support for all children. All children like to know the schedule of what's happening when and what's next. But I'd recommend you add a timer to that too, for how long. The big one with both timers and schedules, it builds independence. Also, it can be used at home and school. It's a skill we can transfer across both. It clearly shows you what's expected, a visual. So if you have classroom rules, make sure you add some infographics to them. Make sure it's clear. But make sure if a child is literal, we share, we care, what does that actually mean? Break it down for the child. But in my experience, visuals, both timers and schedules and written visuals, actually reduce anxiety. So I've got a whole lot of tips how to use visuals, but in the early childhood, they are vital. They're often part of communication for a child with limited communication. So make sure you have a think about using visuals. Oh, by the way, I'm just seeing here there's something on my early childhood course that is now NESA accredited. I am so excited. That was actually like a year-long process to get that NESA accredited. So both my 5-hour face-to-face and live virtual courses and online NESA accredited, as is the online early childhood course for those of you who are interested. Now, they are TQI accredited and accredited everywhere else. Just New South Wales changed their accreditation system last year, so we had to reapply, and the system was more like writing a thesis. So just letting you know if you're in New South Wales, I think that's really important. Now, this one is vital, particularly if you've already started back and you're seeing a child who goes downhill during the day. So they start off engaged and then, whoo. This is normally to do with interoception. And if you don't know about interoception, it is the number one hidden sensory thing we're not aware of. Interoception is knowing you're thirsty, you need the toilet, even that you need to move. Some of my children have no idea what these feelings are. Interoception is such an important thing to teach children about. But again, you're better off having a routine and schedule. 25 minutes work, get up, go to the toilet, get a drink. See, that would have been enough for Dean. He wouldn't need that's a big body break too, to do that. 25 minutes work, get up. For some children, they might need to actually have some quiet time. They might need to go to the calming area. Have a think. But many of my children, are you listening? I want you to really listen. Whatever you're doing, come back to me right now. Children on the spectrum don't know they need the toilet till they're busting. They don't know they're thirsty till they need to drink a whole bottle. They don't know they're hungry till they're starving. This is part of sensory processing. Their body doesn't tell them. So often, this is why they ask to go to the toilet and they wet their pants, or they don't eat at recess and lunch because they say, I wasn't hungry. No, they weren't hungry, but they need to eat. So sometimes I need to actually just do little mini snacks because they just can't eat also when they're around other children because of another thing called mesophobia, which is sound sensitivity to children eating. So that all has to do with understanding the child's sensory needs. And when you do your IEP, I recommend you check if the child has an OT report and if there's anything you need to know. So there is some information on understanding sensory needs, particularly things like a child sitting still. See, some children do whole body listening. And what I mean by that, Some children might actually need to wriggle their hands to help them focus and listen. When I interviewed Temple Grandin and worked with her, she had a bulldog clip in her hand when she was listening, and when she was talking, she drew all over a page. In secondary, is this a student who needs to draw on their page? Some people love knitting or crocheting. I've seen them at my workshops. What does this child need in their hands? What are the sensory tools they need? Some of my children listen at best with their eyes closed. So when you say you need to be looking at the teacher, is that right? What does this child's whole body listening look like? And I would like you to go through that with them. What's best for their eyes? How does their body help? Do they need to actually have a weighted thing on them? What their feet? Some of my children actually like to take their shoes and socks off and rub them on the ground. How do they listen? How does listening look? How does processing look? Because it's not about listening, it's about processing. How do they process verbal information best? So the next one, I think you need to set this up nice and early, is homework, page 24 and 25. And there's a lovely visual there. Make sure you have checklists, keep a schedule, including breaks for food, movement and drink at home as well. Use a timer, have a set workspace. Make sure it's clean and no distractions. Teach skills for staying organised and tidy. Practice strategies for moving on when stuck, because some of my students just rage quit with homework if they're stuck. So if they're stuck, have you got a buddy they can reach out to in the class? So many of my students don't have that. What's that show on Channel 9? Oh, I'm having a moment. Sorry if you're not in Australia. But anyway, one of those shows where you can phone a friend to help you in those quiz games. Some of my students don't have a friend to ask for help, particularly in secondary. Set up a buddy. Set up someone for them to reach out for. Set up where they can email you. Set up where they can contact learning enrichment or learning support. But so many of my students just get stuck and stay stuck. And parents, talk about this in your IEPs too. What are your systems going to be? Of course, get rid of devices and teach time management by getting them to guess how long they think the task's going to take. I like the Pomodoro. I've been doing that for years and then everyone tells me it's called Pomodoro. But, 20 minutes work and see how far you get. And check in. So parents, just tell them we're going to do 20 minutes work. Some of my students, I actually say, let's just do 5 minutes and see how much we get done. And that 5 minutes just gets them in action and then they can keep going. Now, if you want more tips for homework, particularly secondary, in the Essential Guide for Secondary, there's some great tips on page 58 and 59, which come from, banging the book back down, with Anna Tullerman's that she used with her son Daniel and with a lot of students. So we also have in the ebook 6 quick results in secondary, and I know these make sense, but number 2, help the student build skills and independence. This is so important in secondary. Secondary is all about building independence. Understand where the student might be having problems. Try and jump in early. Some of my students don't like to ask for help. Have a system where you can sort of walk past and check in with them. But the number 6, I think, is really important. Small steps of success equals big steps forward. We have to remember, so often we're looking for massive steps. So often it's about small steps of success. Now, if you don't know any of my books, there is actually all the most popular books at the end of the ebook. Plus, there is some information on my upcoming workshops, and I'm calling it a tour this year. I don't know, it just sounds more fun. Come on a tour with me, the Making a Difference tour. I might even get t-shirts, you never know. So, hope you can join me for workshops this year. If I'm not coming near you or you want something earlier, I do have live virtual as well because they have been so popular, and we've had schools sit in whole groups to do the live virtual, particularly in regional. The advantage of live virtual is you don't have to worry about car parking. You don't have to worry about who you're sitting with. You can do it at home. You can do it at school in a room, whatever. I highly recommend you join me this year. I am super excited about this year. I'm super excited about being back, seeing all of you. So please have a look at all the places I'm going. I hope you can join me on the Making a Difference tour. And if not, join me on the live virtual. We'll be making a difference. And remember, with the live virtual, register nice and early. if you're inside Australia, because I can send you out the show bag with a sensory tool and some lollies and a pen and all sorts of fun things for the day. Sorry, I can't send them overseas because I put things in them that make the customs people not like me, and I have to fill in so much paperwork, and I don't particularly like paperwork. Anyway, so I hope you've got some great tips from this podcast episode and you are ready to go and check in and set up your classroom or preschool or early childhood or secondary school classroom for success and make a difference. Best of luck. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies for setting up your classroom. If you're ready to take your learning to the next level this year, please come and join me. I've got a whole lot of face-to-face workshops. They are in Dubbo, Coffs Harbour, Sydney, Melbourne. I can't remember everything right now. Canberra. But even if you can't get to those places, remember you can join me for a live virtual workshop. Or if you prefer to learn online at any time, you can do the online on demand. Or why not invite me to come to your school to present to the whole school or get a cluster of schools together, which I'm doing quite a lot of this year. So please join me this year. I can't wait to see you. I really appreciate you being a podcast listener. If you enjoyed this episode and got some good tips and strategies, I would love you to leave a review or share it with somebody who might find these tips and strategies helpful too. Have a fabulous week, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person or on Zoom.